So, how does one become a member of Congress? Well, the Constitution sets out a few minimum requirements, which you should be aware of for the next quiz. For the House, you have to be at least 25 years old, a citizen for at least 7 years, and have to reside in the state you represent. You don't have to live in the district you represent, but the generally accepted practice is that you do. For the Senate, you have to be at least 30 years old, a citizen for at least 9 years, and have to reside in the state you represent. As a piece of trivia, the word Senate is derived from the Latin word senatus, which means old man. Beyond the simple facts of this requirement, there are a couple things I'd like you all to make sure you get from this slide. The first is that the Senate has higher requirements for memberships than the House of Representatives. You have to be a little older, and you have to have been a citizen for a little longer, which reflected the Founding Fathers' idea that the Senate would be the older, more mature of the two chambers. The second thing I'd like to talk about is how these are the only formal requirements for the job. The Constitution doesn't specify anything beyond those three basic requirements. You don't have to have a college degree, you don't have to know anything about government or anything else. All these requirements are potentially placed on the office by voters. We expect our politicians to have a formal education. We expect them to be charismatic, good public speakers, we expect them to be tall, we expect them to understand government, etc., etc. There are some structural issues that affect who runs for office. The amount of money you need to run for office means typically we get people who are well above the median income. And issues with who the parties recruit typically mean we get older white males running for office as opposed to women or people of color. But it's important to remember that these are all extra requirements put on politicians by the voters, rather than any sort of requirement in the Constitution. A few final thoughts on the qualifications for running for office. Originally, many of the states had property holding and religious qualifications in their state constitutions, but these were explicitly rejected by the Founding Fathers. The framers also rejected a proposal to forbid a member's re-election to office after serving a term because you can't have representation without the chance to throw a member out if he doesn't do his job. This is what Mansbridge calls gyroscopic representation in political science. What gyroscopic representation, again, is the idea that you have the chance to evaluate them after they've done the job, that the whole thing turns around. They also believe that this would weaken Congress by depriving it of its most effective members. You get better at the job as long as you go along. The longer you do something, the better you are, the more effective a legislator you are. As we've spoken about, and will speak about again, Congress gains most of its domestic authority through Article 1, Section 8. The right to regulate interstate commerce has been proven to be a virtually unlimited power through years of Supreme Court decisions, as basically everything can count as interstate commerce in one way or another. And it was under this authority that Congress banned discrimination in public accommodations and housing in the 1960s. Those of you who don't know much about the Freedom Rides, you should read about it. James Farmer, former UMW faculty, the guy there's the statue of out by Ball Circle, was a prominent member of that community. So it's worth reading about, learning a lot about. But we also know that Congress was given significant authority in foreign affairs as well as domestic policy. The Constitution states that only Congress may declare war, raise and finance an army and navy, and call up the state militias. The Senate was granted some special powers over foreign relations through its advise and consent capacity. The Senate ratifies treaties and confirms presidential appointments in that area. Framers believed that the more aristocratic and insulated of the two houses would keep a steadier eye on the nation's long-term interests. The Senate also approves presidential appointments to the Supreme Court and top executive branch positions. To a degree, the framers envisioned the Senate acting as an advisory council to the president, although that hasn't really happened in reality. In distributing power between the House and Senate, the delegates sought a proper balance of authority, and much debate was given to which chamber would have the authority to raise and spend money. The final compromise they came up with required that bills raising revenue originate in the House, with the Senate having an unrestricted right to amend them. The explicit powers of Congress are all listed in Article 1 of the Constitution, so do me a favor, check those out. Be sure you're aware of what the Constitution specifically says that Congress can do, both for life and for the upcoming quiz.